Hello everyone and welcome to the first game we'll be showing from round 5 of this year's FIDE World Cup. We have 16 players left, and out of those 16, 3 will go into the FIDE Candidates Tournament 2026. We have first game is Sam Shankland versus Daniil Dubov. Both of them doing wonders here in the World Cup. Sam Shankland eliminated in round 1 none other than Vasily Ivanchuk. Then he eliminated Vidit and then Richard Rapport in round 4. Now he faced Daniil Dubov, and Dubov also had a very nice run. He eliminated by Jinchi, then Georg Mayer, and then, Pragnananda. Now they face each other. Let's see what happens. Sam with white opens with pawn to e4. We have pawn to e5 by Daniil, knight to f3, knight to c6, and again bishop to b5. We have the Ruy Lopez followed by pawn to a6, Morphy's defense. Bishop to a4, we have knight to f6 and castles kingside. We have bishop to e7, rook to e1, and pawn to b5. We have bishop to b3 and castles kingside. Pawn to a4. Again, all been played before, nothing new here. This is the anti-marshal, and bishop to b7. We have pawn to d3 and pawn to d6. And this is where the game takes an interesting turn, because it's a very regular position, pretty much. You see it every day, but knight bd2 is the move that is usually played. Sometimes knight c3 or pawn to c3 or bishop to d2 or pawn to h3 or even bishop to g5, but the move Sam played is almost never played. There are maybe 3 games in the database with this exact same setup, and obviously it cannot be something that Daniil had expected. So it seems that someone surprises Dubov for the first time in the event. Queen d7. Dubov spending 10 minutes on this move. And okay, let's see what Sam has in store here. Bishop to d2 still exists in the database, but pawn to c4. And it is now, as of move 11, that we have a completely new game. Sam blitzes it out, so obviously queen to d7 does not come as a surprise for him. He goes... After pawn to c4, Daniil goes knight to a5, puts pressure on the bishop, and now you'd probably expect something like bishop to c2, but then allowing b4 might not be all that impressive. Then the knight has to go to b1, pawn to c5, and black has everything black could hope for. Not really a fun position to play. So instead, after knight a5, a captures on b5, we have knight captures on b3, queen captures, and a captures on b5, followed by c captures on b5. So as you can see, Sam is only gaining time, meaning that he is still well within his preparation. And Daniil strikes in the center, pawn to d5. And this is a Daniil move. This is something that no way Sam was prepared for, because the e5 pawn has been left undefended, and it doesn't seem like this is something that you can play for black. And in reality, none of the engine suggestions even remotely suggests d5, so it would be really weird if Sam actually was prepared for d5, even if it's Dubov that he's playing against. So okay, knight captures on e5. This is the first move where Sam actually spent some minutes. He decided to spend 6 minutes on this move. Queen to e6 by Daniil, now putting pressure on the knight, and he just goes back. And this is... probably where you should accept the challenge full on with e captures or d4, but it doesn't really look all that impressive. Like bishop captures, attacks the queen moves, queen f5, the bishop comes to d6, and all of black's pieces go after the white king. So maybe Sam would get a bit too much here, definitely more than he bargained for. So instead, after queen e6, he goes back, knight f3, and d captures on e4. We have queen captures on e6, of course, trading queens. That light square bishop is a monster. F captures on e6 and d captures on e4. We have knight captures on e4 and bishop to e3. Okay, so the question is, can Sam eliminate the c7 pawn and then play with that passed b pawn, or maybe even trade this pawn for this pawn and then advance this pawn to victory? Or will Daniil's Dubov pair, Daniil's bishop pair, prove to be more useful here? So let's see what happens. Bishop to d5. Okay, we have rook a to c1 going after the pawn here, and again, you'd probably expect something like bishop to d6, but not when Daniil is playing. He goes bishop to b4. He attacks the rook on e1, which doesn't seem like a bad trade. Capturing the pawn on c7, creating a passed b pawn for a rook, or rather for an exchange, seems like a great deal. And of course, Sam takes it. Rook captures on c7. We have bishop captures on e1, knight captures on e1, and rook to f7. Offering a rook trade now. pawn to b6. Sam says, all right, let's trade, but we trade on my terms, and then I play b4, b5, b6. I have a defended pass pawn on c7. That's the kind of chess I want to play. And Daniil says, nope, we're not doing that. Knight to d6, and now knight to d3. Okay, now Daniil has to capture. We have rook captures on c7 and b captures on c7, knight to c4, and knight captures on c4. We have bishop captures and knight to e1. Avoiding the capture, we have pawn to e5, trying to get that king into the game, but also maybe e4 in some lines will control that knight on e1. Pawn to h4, creating some breathing room for the white king, so rook a1 will not be such an issue, and king to f7. If you're wondering, wouldn't rook to a1 be a great idea here? Well, not so much, as that pawn will promote to a queen. So the rook for the moment is stuck guarding the back rank. We have king to f7, knight to f3, and king to e6. We have pawn to b4. Now the idea is to get that pawn all the way to b6, but the question is, how do you cross the b5 square? It's a light square, you have a dark square bishop. Not a lot of ways that can happen. So, okay, we have king to d6, attacking the pawn, and bishop back to b6, defending. We have bishop to d5, and the knight back to e1. Bishop to e4, and bishop to a5. So now you don't even have to worry about moves like rook to a1, them coming with check, because, of course, it's impossible to move the rook from the back rank as long as the pawn can go to c8. But if it comes with check, maybe you can for at least one move. We have king to d7, king to f1, and rook to a6. Okay, now the king is covering the queening square, so the rook can be activated. We have king to e2, not king to c6, rook to c6, putting the rook behind the pass pawn, and king to d2. We have king to c8, pawn to g4, and now rook to c4, threatening to move the bishop and then start gobbling up those pawns. Pawn to f3 and the bishop back to b1. Again, question whether it's better placed on b7, but okay, it's you have to play something, and Daniil is already down to 2 minutes on the clock. 2 more moves to reach time control. We have pawn to h5, king to b7, and now king to e3. One more move for Daniil to reach time control, and he plays rook to c3 check. Unfortunately for Daniil, it was the critical moment of the game, and pawn to e4 makes it very, very hard for white to find moves. Point being that if you play pawn to f4, and really there really aren't all that many great moves, then you can go in with rook c3 check. And now it doesn't matter. If you go king to f2, then pawn to e3 check, king f3, bishop to a2 with bishop to d5. Looks very, very scary, and in fact, it is winning for black. And if you go king to e2 instead of f3, again, rook to g3, you go after the king side pawns. Now if g5, then rook to h3, and you just start gobbling them up. It's a winning position. But Daniil played rook to c3 with check, and now it's not so simple. King f2, and now pawn to e4, pawn to f4. Again, giving Daniil a bit too much. With pawn to b5, it's not that easy to find a move here for black. If you go rook to c5, you go after the pawn, then you have time for f4, and then after rook captures on b5, you can go bishop to c3, and after, well, defending that pawn somehow, let's say you advance it to g6, then captures bishop e5, you defend everything here, you defend on c7, you're going to play g5, and it holds. But after pawn to e4, Sam played pawn to f4, and now Daniil again has the option of playing pawn to e3. And here, again, it would be quite similar, because if e3, king f3, you can play bishop a2. You go after that king, and if king to, or whatever you play, let's say you go king to e4, you want to stop bishop to d5, then pawn to e2 is extremely annoying. The king can no longer go back, the rook controls the third rank, and objectively the position is winning. And even if you don't do that, what else can you play? You can maybe get the king to f4, but still, this check, then king to f4, rook a3, e2 will come at some point. Even if knight c2 attacking the rook, you can still play pawn to e2. You don't care about the rook on a3, and there's really no good move here for white. So definitely a difficult position for Daniil to handle, but he doesn't play pawn to e3. He plays bishop to a2. He says, all right, let's prepare it. Pawn to e3 check, and then bishop to d5, but now pawn to f5, and again, he doesn't play it. Now he already gained additional time, but he doesn't find it, and it's still winning. It's just nothing really changed with the position. He played bishop to c4. Seems like he thinks he can always play it, but he wants to stop pawn to b5. But now bishop to b6, and now you're no longer playing it. There's just no way to cross that e3 square. It's a dark square, and your light square bishop cannot help out with that. So bishop to d5, we have bishop to d4, pawn to e3 with check. Now he has to give it up. There's no way to find the progress otherwise. Bishop captures and the rook to c4. Now going after these two pawns, king g3, and king captures on c7. We have pawn to b5, king to d6, and pawn to b6. Now that's a defended pass pawn, and it's 4 pawns versus 2, plus it's a rook versus a knight. So pretty equal. Rook to c3, we have king to f4 and rook to c4 check. We have king to g5 and pawn to h6 with check, forcing the king back, because if you go forward, then rook captures on g4. So the king has to come to h4, bishop to e4, we have king to g3 and rook to b4, putting the rook behind the pass pawn. And yeah, you're never getting that pawn to b7. That is impossible. And, well, very, very difficult to imagine you losing the g7 pawn unless you blunder something like bishop d2, bishop c3, and captures without Daniil playing anything for 3 moves. So here, knight f3 was played. The bishop comes off the board. The knight as well captures, king e5, bishop to d2, hoping of a check here to pick up the g7 pawn. But Daniil just played rook b3 check. We have bishop to e3, and he was in this position on move 57 that Sam and Daniil agreed to a draw, as there is nothing more to be done here. So maybe it's the same as with with Prague. Daniil just doesn't struggle. I mean, he plays some normal moves. He gains a winning position. He doesn't capitalize on it, and then he just goes into tie breaks and crushes his opponent in rapid or blitz, as he's a former world rapid champion. Or will it be different against Sam? Or will he try something with the white pieces now? I don't know. It's hard to say. He also had a winning position against Prague and then just drew quickly with white. So will we see a quick draw tomorrow with white against Sam, or will he go for something? Well, only tomorrow will tell us that. But yeah, very much looking forward to that, and of course any possible tiebreaks between them. It was a nice tough game, and if Sam wins tomorrow with black, then it's gonna come back to haunt Dubov. But yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed the first game that we're showing. I'm not going to discuss the results of any of the other games because I plan to show more, so stay tuned for that. So I really hope you enjoyed that. I would like to thank Ivan Sterling, Yun Young, Udo Brandt, Eddie Sphere, and David Gasparian for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.